Hello, 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 hello. Mahina na talaga ba? Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. So today we will be having our final conference for this year. So the module 10 includes ophthalmic anesthesia. Eh? Okay, so we are going to discuss three reports. First would be the cataract, strabismus, and glaucoma surgery. And then would be the vitreoretinal oculoplastic and orbital surgery, and then anesthetic blocks for ophthalmic surgery. So, okay, let's stand up and pray. And Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the gift of today, for the opportunity to again together as a department, share ideas, and to learn from our members and colleagues. We pray for your guidance as we discuss the matters of life. May not only enlighten our minds, but also fill our hearts with your name. We humbly ask that you continue to bless us, that we may fulfill our duties to service of our patients. May you continue to keep us and loved ones safe and safe. Everything that we do, we offer to you. This we pray. Amen. Okay, upo na po tayo. Diyan na ba si Kylie? Diyan na si Kylie. So, I'll be the first reporter. I'll be discussing anesthesia for cataract, strabismus, and glaucoma surgery. And these are my objectives. So let's proceed with the pre-operative assessment. So what are the things that we should consider among patients undergoing eye surgery? So every eye surgery patients are often at the extremes of age, including pediatrics and geriatric patients. Hence, we should take into consideration specific age-related comorbidities of the patients. In addition, to the geriatric patients, they have most of the time have multiple systemic comorbidities. So we should take note of them as well. So it is also important to take note of the prior history of surgery or anesthetic-related complications. Specifically for strabismus surgery, according to our studies, patients undergoing strabismus surgery is at a higher incidence of malignant hyperthermia. So it is important to determine personal or any family history of malignant hyperthermia of patients undergoing strabismus surgery. Also, it is important to know other allergic reactions to any drugs or previous anesthetic agents used to them. Also, many elderly patients are usually taking on anticoagulants or antiplatelet due to the pre-existing cardiovascular comorbidities, which may put them at risk of hemorrhagic events. So, according to Barash and Miller, some studies suggest that these medications should be held prior to surgery, and other studies allow them to continue even if they are going regional blocks since the hemorrhagic events are still low. So for this patient, ideally, we should also request for the bleeding parameters. And then, as usually, we always include the physical examination, especially in relation to the patient's comorbidities. And after we take into the consideration these factors, then that's where we will be able to come up with our anesthesia plan. So these are the four usually anesthetic plans that are done during eye surgery, especially for strabismus, cataract, and glaucoma. So number one, topical anesthesia. Usually, these are administered by the ophthalmologist and not by us. However, the problem here is this requires patient cooperation. Since the patient is awake, patient is aware of the procedure that he or she is undergoing. Um, Also, other commonly encountered events include coughing or orthopnea, those patients who cannot lie flat and restlessness. So if the patient is experiencing this type of events, that's where our sedation will come. So it can be an adjunct to topical anesthesia, even for regional ocular blocks, mainly for anxiolysis. So usually the drugs that we use are midazolam and opioids. According to our readings, propofol also can be given uh, as an adjunct sedative during ophthalmic procedures. However, there is a certain side effect called propofol-induced sneezing that can be a problem during sedation. So it can be blunted by midazolam or fentanyl. So again, other issues including under sedation. So if the patient is under sedated, it may lead to increased BP, IOP, or ICP, which can be deleterious to the patient, especially with cerebrovascular or cardiovascular diseases. And then another anesthetic technique would be regional or ocular blocks. So there will be a separate discussion of this anesthesia later by Dr. Borja. And then general anesthesia, usually done among pediatric patients, also can be done for geriatric patients or for those patients that will be undergoing complex eye surgery such as trauma. So the goal of general anesthesia in ophthalmic surgery is to prevent intraoperative movement, to prevent eye-related complications such as increased IOP and hemorrhage. So, uh, okay. Let's proceed with cataract. So cataract surgery is the most common eye surgery in the world. Usually this is an ambulatory case only. And the goal of cataract surgery is to remove the opacified crystalline lens, usually on outpatient basis. So commonly, this can be done through topical anesthesia only. So these are the agents that are used in topical anesthesia, 0.5% tetracaine, 0.75% bupivacaine eye drops, 2% lidocaine, and what we usually encounter in ASU is the proparacaine 0.5% or alkane. So topical anesthesia can be done also through monitored anesthesia care with adjunct sedation. So as I mentioned before, so these are the agents that we use for sedation. Midazolam with the dosage of 0.02 to 0.04 milligram per kilogram IV or IM for anxiolysis. Low-dose propofol, such as 25 to 75 microgram per kilogram per minute infusion or 0.25 to 0.5 microgram per kilogram bolus. Opioids such as fentanyl, nalbuphine, or butor can also be given. Also, this provides sedative effects. Other sedative agents such as ketamine is not a good choice since it may increase IOP temporarily and may cause dysphoria and hallucination post-operatively. And then periorbital blocks or ocular blocks to provide akinesia or immobility of the eye during surgery and analgesia as well. So again, this will have a separate discussion later. And then for cataract surgery, for pediatric cataract, usually they undergo general anesthesia. Other considerations for general anesthesia in cataract surgery includes uncooperative patient or those patients who cannot tolerate local anesthesia, even with sedation, or upon patient's request. We can use general endotracheal anesthesia or supraglottic airway. Supraglottic airway is advantageous in a sense that it has a lesser incidence of increased IOP on insertion and extubation. Also, this provides less bucking and coughing on emergence. So these are the considerations, anesthetic considerations for cataract surgery. Then let's go to strabismus. So patients undergoing strabismus surgery, the surgical procedure is used to treat the malalignment or misalignment of ocular rectus muscles of the patient. So this type of procedure is more common in pediatric population Uh, that's why we usually prefer general anesthesia. So again, general endotracheal anesthesia or supraglottic airway can be used. Um, However, for cooperative adult populations, sometimes they can the ophthalmologist can proceed with ocular blocks with our adjunct of sedations. So what are the common concerns encountered in strabismus? So since we are dealing with muscle surgery, um, one event would be the oculocardiac reflex, wherein there will be a resultant bradycardia upon uh, eye manipulation. So I think this was discussed last conference by Dr. Rivera. And then again, malignant hyperthermia, as I mentioned before, because according to Barash, malignant hyperthermia, especially people susceptible to malignant hyperthermia, often have localized areas of skeletal muscle weakness or other musculoskeletal abnormalities, such as strabismus. So, yes, ma'am. Sabi din po dun sa ibang journals, parang dinedefine na nila na as risk factor. Yes, ma'am. Opo. So to reiterate lang, the afferent in oculocardiac reflex is the ophthalmic branch of trigeminal nerve, and the efferent is the vagus nerve. And then, so what can we do if we are faced with oculocardiac reflex? So first, non-pharmacologic, we ask the surgeon to temporarily stop the ocular manipulation. Or if the patient is refractory, presents with refractory bradycardia, then that's where our pharmacologic intervention come. Atropine 1 milligram initial bolus with a maximum of 3 milligrams dosage. And then so eye surgery, muscle eye surgery is also at a higher risk of post-operative uh, nausea and vomiting. So it is imperative to give PONV prophylaxis. So what we usually give is ondansetron, dexamethasone, or droperidol. However, for droperidol, it has an FDA black box warning due to QT prolongation. So the dosage for ondansetron, usually for pediatric patient, is 0.1 milligram per kilogram. Same with dexamethasone, 0.1 milligram per kilogram. And then another concern, this is mainly for the surgeon, would be the force duction test. So they usually do this on strabismus surgery to determine whether the malalignment is due to muscle paralysis or restrictive force. So in our side, there's a drug that you should avoid, especially for strabismus surgery, which is succinylcholine. Other than increasing the IOP, using succinylcholine also prolongs the response on uh, force duction testing, so it may give a false positive result for the ophthalmologist. So again, for strabismus, usually pediatric patients, they undergo general anesthesia, and for some adult patients that are cooperative, it can be done with ocular blocks with adjunct sedation. And then next would be glaucoma. Glaucoma is a dysregulation of aqueous humor homeostasis leading to elevated IOP. So the normal IOP is 10 to 21. And glaucoma can be classified into two categories, the open angle glaucoma and closed angle glaucoma. So what are the anesthetic considerations for this? Um, According to the journals that I've read, most of patients undergoing glaucoma surgery undergo general anesthesia, but other surgeons they opt for ocular block with adjunct of sedation as well. So for glaucoma, since the patient is already experiencing increased IOP, the concern here is the possible increased IOP during laryngoscopy. So it is important that we use video laryngoscope, and through our IV medications, we should be able to block the sympathetic response during intubation as well as extubation. Okay, so for pediatric patients, preoperatively or pre-induction, some patients can be agitated or crying or restless. So we can sedate them initially for anxiolysis with midazolam to prevent transient increase in IOP prior to induction. So again, the anesthetic choice for glaucoma would be either general anesthesia or ocular blocks with adjunct sedation. And then for the post-operative care, yes, apa. It causes transient increase din po kasi ng IOP. Transient increase of 5 to 10, ma'am. Alam ko yung 5 to 10. SUCS sa IOP. So, ayun. And then for the post-operative care, again, as I mentioned, we should prevent bucking and coughing during emergence. So ideally, what we can do is suction the patient while at deep anesthesia, proper timing of extubation, and other resources. I suggest that we use intravenous lidocaine to blunt the sympathetic reflex on extubation. And then also post-operative nausea and vomiting prophylaxis for adult patients on ondansetron of 4 milligrams and dexamethasone of 4 milligrams. And then for pediatric would be the dosage of 0.1 milligram per kilogram for the same drug. And then thermoregulation is also important. Shivering may be present on patients with extreme of age. This may transiently increase IOP as well post-operatively. So thermoregulation is very important. And then for the pain management, usually the pain score of patients undergoing cataracts, strabismus, and glaucoma surgery is 1 to 3. So this can be managed using acetaminophen or paracetamol or NSAID. So that ends my report. Here are my references. Thank you.
Good afternoon, doctors. Here is the part 2 for the anesthesia of ophthalmic procedures. For my objectives, I'm sorry.
Yes, no, the incidents of maybe pertain na prayer. Condemnation. Punta sa prayer. So that the prayer. na kumpanya ko yun. So it went the first year resident, second year resident, third year, so consultant ng nag-pre-op. Nangyari. No? I think it's wrong. No? I think it's unacceptable. And anyone involved in this. Now, just remember even sa mga second year So yun, to the point na consultant na no? Next time, assumption eh. Okay? Now, kung magtutok kayo ng trabaho, hindi ko sa akin. Kasi magdala ko coach. Pwede naman kayo mag-break na. Kahit magtrabaho, pwede naman kayo mag-go. Di ba? Ngayon lang yung kayo nagtatrabaho. Ngayon lang yung kahit pasyente, kahit sa nagtutok kayo. Now, kaya kinuha ng consultant nyo, yung kasi ayaw nagtutukan nga kayo. Di ba? Kasi service station. Pero ikaw, sa magpapacheck up ka, hintayin na lang isang ako. Kaya kayo. Kasi maghintay, para mag-pre-op, kayo na lang hinihintay. So, ayaw na kayo naghihintay ng pasyente dahil sa pagkakas nyo. Okay? Dahil kasi nagtamaran yun eh. Kasi nagtuturuan kayo. Now, pag may pasyente nagtanong sa inyo, saan po ako pupunta ganito, ayaw kayo. Basta nyo na ituturo ko sa kayo. Okay? Kasi sila, pumila sila. Pumila sila, matagal. Sila ng papasahe. Parang tignan natin. Diba? Be considerate. You are here for service, training, research. Service. Binabayaran kayo for your services. Okay? Not just training for anesthesia, service. Ayaw kayo. Ayaw kayo. Diba? Ngayon, pagka nakatanggap kayo ng referral, ayaw kayo tatagay sa kapatid referral, do something about it. Unless naka-intubate yung pasyente ko, maintindihan ko yun. Pero alam ko, since anesthesiologist ako, may oras kayo kasi okay? Sa dami ng presidente natin, walang reason para sabihin ng pasyente, isang oras na po ako naghihintay. Okay? Yung mga second year na incoming third year, this way, or like third year kayo, then you will know it. Okay? They're not here to play around. They're here to give service and to train for anesthesia. Nothing else. We're not here to be friends. We're give the minimum, give the pay. It may appear that we're friendly to you, but we're not. Okay? We're just trying to lighten your stay here. I'm just reminding you, you're here for training, service, and research. Not professional.
So to continue my lecture, I am here to present anesthesia for ophthalmic procedures part 2. So for the objectives of this lecture, to be familiar with vitreoretinal and orbital procedures we usually encounter in the OR setting, to compare modes of anesthesia per specific ophthalmologic procedure, and to apply background knowledge on these types of procedures in looking for anesthetic considerations which we could apply to our individual patients. So for orbital surgeries, brief background. For enucleation, it is the removal of the entire globe and portion of the optic nerve performed for painful blind eyes or intraocular tumors. So we often get these OR skips as emergencies. Evisceration is removing all intraocular contents through corneoscleral incision, leaving the scleral shell with attached adnexa in place. And exenteration, which is more extensive, management of aggressive malignant tumors or infections, often including surrounding orbital bone and adjacent sinuses removed. Another procedure is orbitotomy for surgical access to the orbit required for biopsy cases, excision of masses, drainage of orbital abscesses, removal of foreign body, and or repair of orbital fractures. So there are variant procedures or approaches which are here, anterior orbitotomy for small tumors, lateral orbitotomy for large tumors, located further posteriorly in the orbit, as well as those lesions involving the lacrimal gland. We also have medial orbitotomy to access lesions that are located medial to the optic nerve. So in general, for the anesthetic considerations, for cases such as this one, these patients are generally healthy aside from infection, tumor, or trauma underlying their ocular or periocular pathology. So the pre-op evaluation should focus on possible coexisting diseases, comorbidities, and the systemic manifestations of previous therapeutic interventions. So for cases such as this, anesthetic technique based on several sources, usually is Genta with local anesthetic blocks. So for the induction agents, we often use opioids, propofol, still with the use of muscle relaxants. Though for maintenance, muscle relaxation is technically not required. For emergence, common occurrence of PONV in these cases, so we should give dexamethasone 4 milligrams IV, ondansetron 4 milligrams IV if there are no contraindications. So for the fluid requirements, around 4 to 6 ml per kilogram per hour, you can give either plain NSS or plain LR if there are no contraindications. And also for the complications, general complications of these kinds of procedures have been tackled earlier. This is the oculocardiac reflex. So for the pain management, cases such as this one would have a pain score of around 4 to 6. We can give acetaminophen NSAIDs if there are no contraindications. We can also give occasional opioids. So we can correlate that with several of our referrals. We often give paracetamol if the patient as ARES protocols. We can give paracetamol and then shift it to oral. But if we think that the patient cannot tolerate the pain, we can give occasional opioids such as naltrexone IV. So for vitreoretinal surgeries, we have these involve scleral buckling, vitrectomy, gas fluid exchange, and injection of vitreous substitutes. So I included here with the several terminologies we should be familiar with. For the scleral buckle, external procedure in the eye may either be entered by a small needle, puncture, or none at all. For the purpose of draining subretinal fluid or injection of gas. Also, cryotherapy. These are lasers used frequently to establish chorioretinal adhesions around the retinal tears. And vitrectomy, removal of the vitreous, commonly performed to reduce traction on the retina to decrease retinal detachment, clear blood and debris, and also remove scar tissue. This is an intraocular procedure. So for retinal surgeries, retinal detachment and most specifically often require urgent surgeries. So for the surgical time, I included this as well. For pneumatic retinopexy, it's around 20 minutes. For the scleral buckle, 30 minutes to 2 hours. And vitrectomy, it can be done around 1 to 4 hours. Surgical time, estimated surgical time is important as per several sources since we can use not only JETA, but we can use IV sedation in some of these cases. So same as the other, same as orbital surgeries, retinal surgeries has a mean score of 4 to 6 as well. So for the anesthetic considerations, we can do MAC local. In MAC local cases, the need for anxiolytics can often be reduced or eliminated simply by discussing to the patient in detail what will happen to the patient during the procedure, and also addressing the patient's concerns such as claustrophobia, positional pain, dyspnea. So we can give anxiolytics, midazolam 0.5 milligrams per kilograms for pediatric patients and midazolam 1 to 2 milligrams IV incrementally for adults to alleviate their anxiety. Most vitreous and retinal procedures can be accomplished using regional anesthetic techniques, such as retrobulbar, peribulbar, or subtenon blocks, with concomitant IV sedation. This topic will be further elaborated by Dr. Borja later. So for the goal of MAC, the anesthesiologist's goal mainly is for the patient to be comfortable, to have a cooperative patient who can lie completely still without falling asleep, hereby avoiding uncontrolled movement when suddenly awakened, usually for 1 to 2 hours, while avoiding Valsalva-like events such as coughing. So procedures requiring more than 2 hours and patients or surgeons with special needs, such as those with claustrophobia and uncooperative patients, immature patients, pediatric patients, these patients benefit from general anesthesia. So for the cardiovascular, preoperatively, there are patients which receive mannitol to decrease IOP by increasing plasma oncotic pressure relative to the aqueous humor pressure. So the total dosage should not exceed 1.5 to 2 grams per kilogram IV over a 30 to 60-minute period. Patients on antithrombotic drugs may be at higher risk for bleeding. So the decision to stop these drugs and institute heparin bridge therapy should be made in consultation with both the surgeon and the prescribing physician. So patients with diabetes mellitus has an increased risk for silent myocardial ischemia and pulmonary aspiration secondary to diabetic gastroparesis. So for renal patients, acetazolamide, a carbonic anhydrase inhibitor, decreases secretion of aqueous humor and therefore inhibits renal carbonic anhydrase, causing loss of bicarb, sodium, potassium, and water. So patients on chronic therapy may be acidotic, hypokalemic, and hyponatremic. So preoperatively, careful preoperative evaluation of electrolytes should be done as well. So for the anesthetic technique in general for these cases, JETA or local anesthetic blocks, retinal detachment surgery may be performed under regional anesthesia, such as the blocks which Dr. Borja will elaborate later. However, if the surgery is expected to be more than 2 hours, general anesthesia may be preferable. So for the induction agents, we can use standard induction agents, appropriate for patients, while physically taking care not to put pressure on the affected eye with the face mask. For the standard maintenance, ophthalmologists use expanding gases such as sulfur hexafluoride or SF6 or perfluoropropane C3F8 for internal tamponade of retinal tears. If ENCO is used, the injected bubble may expand rapidly, causing a dramatic rise in IOP, which can impair retinal blood flow. Yung normal IOP, as per our sources, is around 10 to 22. And also, in our institution, we don't use N2O at QMFC at all. So for the emergence, if the use of narcotics for pain control, we can consider use of lidocaine around 1 to 1.5 milligrams per kilograms 5 minutes prior to extubation to provide smooth emergence. Also, as the same one earlier, common occurrence of PONV requires administration of anti-emetics such as metoclopramide and ondansetron before the end of surgery. So we can give metoclopramide 10 to 20 milligrams IV and ondansetron 4 to 8 milligrams IV. So for the fluid requirements, around 4 to 6 ml per kilogram per hour. The complications with this procedures are oculocardiac reflex, POMV, ptosis, diplopia. And also for the pain management, we could also give acetaminophen, NSAIDs, and occasional opioids, as is the pain score of these procedures are around 4 to 6 as well. So here are my references. It was discussed earlier dito, dun sa earlier procedures. Um, we can give, first of all, if we see that the patient is exhibiting oculocardiac reflex symptoms such as bradycardia, which is the most common, we should inform the surgeon immediately because usually the oculocardiac reflex happens when there is traction of the EOMs, especially the medial rectus. So usually in surgeries such as those one, especially in strabismus surgeries, we should also inform the surgeons prior to the OR to have us informed if they're pulling the muscles already. So we can take note or like much be more vigilant in monitoring the patient. So if there is still bradycardia, even if the surgeons have stopped the manipulation of the or traction of the muscles, we can give 0.5 atropine until 3 milligrams po. 3 milligrams. Na. Usually it resolves with atropine na dope. Yun.
The reason waiting for that.
Sorry, Doc. For there are several journals doc na nagko-contradict din. Meron pong parang a study in India na we can do pre-treatment pero yung study sa around Great Britain kino-contradict niya po na we cannot actually do pre-treatment kasi not everybody um exhibits oculocardiac reflex even with the same procedure po. It's not here, sir. I can look at it na lang po tapos forward ano. Yung afferent is yung ocular branch ng trigeminal nerve and then yung vagus po yung efferent. For the afferent nerve po, yung ophthalmic branch ng trigeminal nerve, and then for the efferent, we have the vagus nerve. Yung open globe injuries, doc, under ano ko na siya nilagay? Yung orbit surgery. Ito po. Enucleation on orbitotomy. Ito. Yun po. Succinil is contraindication. Kasi nag-i-increase po siya ng iota 5 to 10 to. But yung for 5 sila. Um, I from what I've read, no, it is contraindicated po. Kasi we can use alternatives naman to like high dose stroke if we actually need to. There is around around 5, 5 to 10 yung tinataas around 5. Increase in IOP during intubation is higher, actually, more than the use of succinylcholine. Five to 10. Any more questions? Okay, that concludes the end of my presentation. I'm gonna call on Dr. Borja to report on blocks.
Good afternoon po, everyone. I am Kylie Borja, second year anesthesia resident, and today I will be reporting on anesthetic blocks for ophthalmic surgery. So for my objectives, first is to review the different regional blocks used in ophthalmic surgeries, and then to learn the different techniques to perform these ophthalmic blocks. So intraocular surgeries can be done under general anesthesia, regional, or local anesthesia. However, regional anesthesia is the standard for most procedures for cataract, glaucoma, and vitreoretinal surgery. It provides akinesia or immobility of the globe and anesthesia of the eye. It is a reliable procedure and it provides good postoperative analgesia and is less associated with post-op nausea and vomiting. So these are the contraindications for anesthetic blocks in ophthalmic surgeries. Most of these are relative contraindications and may require support from an anesthesiologist. So this includes children or patient refusal, patients with dementia, patients with GCS of less than 14, poor NPO, patients who are unable to lie flat or stay still, patients with ASA classification of 3 to 4, patient who has only one eye left, patient with previous experience of oculocardiac reflex, long operation duration, patients with difficult airway since in these patients, intraoperative management from an anesthesiologist may be required. Patients with bleeding disorders, localized infection, and long axial length around more than 25 millimeter or those patients who are high myopes. So these are the anesthetic blocks in ophthalmic surgery. The retrobulbar block, peribulbar block, subtenon block, and facial nerve block. So first, the local anesthetic solutions used for these techniques. Usually, we use a 1:1 ratio of bupivacaine 0.5% or 0.75% and lidocaine 2% without epinephrine. And hyaluronidase can also be added. It is the enzyme that breaks down hyaluronic acid, which is part of the normal extracellular matrix. It is added to speed tissue penetration, and it prevents anesthetic-related damage to the extraocular muscles by reducing the total dose required for local anesthesia. So first is the retrobulbar block. This is also known as the intraconal block. From the name itself, it requires a need. The needle is situated inside the orbital cone. The name retrobulbar comes from the terms retro, behind, which means behind, and bulbar, the globe. So this is considered the gold standard regional block up to the 1990s, and it's indicated for patients wherein complete anesthesia and akinesia is required, and patients or procedures unsuitable for less invasive block. It has a quicker onset and is associated with less chemosis compared with peribulbar block. So for the technique, as with all blocks, a topical tetracaine or topical anesthetic is first applied to the conjunctiva. The skin is around the conjunctiva, and the skin and the conjunctiva is prepared with povidone iodine, and landmarks are palpated. So for this block, the landmark is lateral to the junction of the lateral third and middle third of the inferior orbital rim. So there are two routes that can be used for this technique. First is the percutaneous route. So finger pressure is we can use a finger to apply pressure above the rim to push the globe up and feel for the gap between the orbit and the intraorbital bone to improve track for needle and to reduce the risk of globe penetration. If using the transconjunctival route, we use a finger pressure to pull the lower lid down. So a 25 to 27 gauge needle is introduced, and no longer than 31 millimeters is introduced inside. And blunt or semi-blunt needles are avoided since this could increase the risk for trauma. So the needle is inserted under the globe, and once past it, aim it up inwards and upwards to reach the space behind the globe, aiming for the back of the occiput. So minimal amounts of local anesthetic is required, so as little as 2 ml can be given, but up to 5 ml is usually given. So complications of retrobulbar block. So in general, these are complications for anesthetic blocks when using sharp needles. And sharp needles. So subarachnoid spread of local anesthesia. So there is retrograde tracking of local anesthetic along the optic nerve sheath into the subdural subarachnoid space. So there could be partial or total progressive brainstem anesthesia, which could manifest as aphasia, confusion, dysphagia, apnea, cardiac arrest, or loss of consciousness or seizures. So management of this is mainly supportive since total recovery is expected within several hours. So another complication is intravascular injection of the local anesthetic. Although systemic effects are unlikely due to the small amount of local anesthetic use. But there could still be accidental intraarterial injection, which can cause CNS excitation and seizures, and retrograde passage of local anesthetic from the ophthalmic artery to the internal carotid artery and delivered to the thalamus and the midbrain. And next is retrobulbar hemorrhage, which is a sight-threatening complication. So in venous hemorrhage, this spreads slowly and long-term visual problems are unlikely. However, in arterial hemorrhage, there is rapid orbital swelling, marked proptosis with globe immobility, inability to close the lips, and massive blood staining of lids and the conjunctiva. So compression hematoma can threaten retinal perfusion, leading to severe visual loss. So to decompress the orbit, lateral canthotomy can be done. Other complications include globe perforation. So normally the risk is less than 0.1% for globe perforation. However, in patients with an axial length of more than 26 millimeter, particularly those who have highly myopic eyes, the risk for globe perforation increases up to 0.7%. Other complications include diplopia, oculocardiac reflex, injury to the medial wall, and optic nerve compression and central artery closure due to the raise in the orbital pressure from the local anesthesia infiltration. So next type of block is the peribulbar block, also known as the extraconal block. So in contrast with the retrobulbar block, the needle in peribulbar block is situated outside of the orbital cone. So the name peribulbar means peri, or the peri means around, bulbar globe. So and the anesthetic is given around the globe. So indications for relatively complete anesthesia and akinesia is required, and for procedures or patients unsuitable for subtenon's block, which will be discussed later. So in this type of block, the needle is introduced outside the cone, preventing retrobulbar hemorrhage and reducing the risk of optic nerve injury. There are two main approaches for peribulbar block, the inferotemporal and the medial peribulbar block. So seen in this image are the two types of techniques. So again, first, local anesthetic such as tetracaine is applied to the conjunctiva. Iodine is applied to the skin or the conjunctiva, depending on the approach. If the inferotemporal technique is done, so the landmarks is similar with the retrobulbar. It aims to block the nasociliary, lacrimal, frontal, supraorbital, and supratrochlear and infraorbital nerves. It avoids aiming directly behind the globe, hence avoiding the three principal risks of retrobulbar blocks, and conveniently blocks the orbicularis oculi as well. So for this technique, a bigger volume of local anesthetic is needed, around 6 to 8 ml. For the peribulbar block technique, so it is usually supplementary to inferotemporal peribulbar block. It aims to block the medial branches of the nasociliary, supratrochlear, supraorbital nerves, the infratrochlear, and the long ciliary nerves. It is a safe injection site due to the 4 to 10 millimeter distance between the globe equator and the medial orbital wall and the fat pad. A 27 gauge needle, no longer than 22 millimeter, is pushed straight back through the medial caruncle and it penetrates the medial canthal tendon and lacrimal sac. There is a subtle give in resistance to signify correct position, and around 3 to 5 ml of local anesthetic is infiltrated. So complications. First is there could be increased ocular pressure due to the increased volume of infiltrated local anesthetic. And this is reduced by allowing a period of diffusion around 10 to 15 minutes before starting the operation, or use of decompression devices such as Honan's balloon. The next type of block is the subtenon block. This technique is developed to avoid the complication of sharp needles. So this technique uses a cannula instead of a sharp needle. So Tennant's capsule or the epixclera is a thin layer of connective tissue surrounding the globe. And the subtenant space or the epixcleral space is the potential space between the subtenant's capsule and the sclera. So a blunt cannula under the fascia of tenon is used. So this is indicated for the following. So first, it provides anesthesia and akinesia without requiring a sharp needle. So this is appropriate for patients at higher risk of complications from sharp needle blocks, such as those with high myopes, patients with scleral explants, and those taking anticoagulants. However, this is not suitable for surgery requiring intact conjunctiva, mostly glaucoma surgeries. So for the technique again, a topical anesthetic is applied to the conjunctiva. Speculum is placed to retract the lids. 2 to 3 millimeter spot of cautery can be made, 5 millimeter from the limbus in the inferonasal or inferolateral quadrant. And a 2 millimeter incision is made in the conjunctiva with blunt dissection through the fascia. A blunt cannula is directed posteriorly, but not beyond the equator of the globe, with the injection of 1 to 3 ml of local anesthetic. So complications include first is block failure due to backflow of local anesthetic. Subconjunctival hemorrhage and subconjunctival swelling can also recur, but usually resolves with gentle orbital pressure. Other complications include raised intraorbital pressure, globe trauma, particularly if with previous vitreoretinal surgery, retrobulbar hemorrhage, and deep posterior dissection risks central spread of the local anesthetic. Lastly is the facial nerve block. So this is to prevent squeezing of eyelids, which interferes with surgery and increases intraocular pressure. So akinesia of the orbicularis oculi muscle can be achieved by 2 techniques. First is the Van Lint block, wherein it blocks the terminal branches of the facial nerve, and the O'Brien block or the Nadba-Freeman block, which blocks the proximal trunk of the facial nerve. So first is the Van Lint block. So this block, to perform this block, the needle is placed 1 centimeter lateral to the orbital rim, and 2 to 4 ml of anesthetic is injected along the superolateral and inferolateral orbital rims. A modified Van Lint block is a common variant achieved by inserting the needle 1 centimeter more lateral than the original insertion point to avoid lid edema. The disadvantage for this block is patient discomfort, its proximity to the eye, and postoperative ecchymosis. Next is the O'Brien block. To perform this block, the mandibular condyle is palpated inferior to the posterior zygomatic process and anterior to the tragus of the ear as the patient opens and closes the jaw. The needle is inserted perpendicular to the skin, approximately 1 centimeter to the periosteum. As the needle is withdrawn, 3 ml of anesthetic is injected. Lastly, the Nadba-Freeman block. To do this block, a 12 millimeter 25 gauge needle is inserted perpendicular to the skin between the mastoid process and the posterior border of the mandible. The needle is advanced full length, and after careful aspiration, 3 ml of anesthetic is injected as the needle is withdrawn. This blocks the entire trunk of the facial nerve, and lower facial droop is expected for several hours postoperatively. The major disadvantage of facial nerve block is that its close proximity to the injection to important structures such as the carotid artery and the glossopharyngeal nerve. That's it po for my report. Thank you po. Injuries. Um, from what I've read po, sir, there's no mention po of using regional blocks for open globe injuries po eh. So usually for based from my discussion po kasi sir, since in open globe injuries, there could be open arteries and veins already. So application of regional blocks, local anesthetics can cause infiltration to the vessels as well po, which could increase complications po of local anesthetics. And also, since there's already increased, since intraocular pressure is also increased in open globe injuries, additional infiltration of local anesthetic can further increase the pressure of around the globe. Further increase in pressure po of the eye could cause optic nerve compression and ophthalmic artery compression din po, which could pwede bigyan prolapse ng ocular segments. So a successful block po could be check if the globe can no longer be moved po since the extraocular muscles are blocked. And then if there is inability to open the lids or close the lids. Thank you po. Ha?
Christmas party.
Ay, sis, ako yung kapatid. Kaya na.